Most families have the version of the same story. Everything is fine, life is busy, your parent is mostly okay, and so the conversation keeps getting put off because it is uncomfortable, because timing never feels right, because nobody wants to be the one to bring it up, right? And then something happens, an emergency, right? A sudden health event, a diagnosis that changes everything, and now all the decisions that should have been made calmly together over time have to be made right now in a hallway under fluorescent lights where while everyone is terrified. That is the scenario that this video will hopefully prevent for families that are viewing it. Because the conversation I'm going to talk about today is not complicated. It's not one long, heavy, definitive talk that you have once and never revisit. It's going to be a series of smaller moments where you get to know your parent better, where they get to feel heard, where the people who love them learn what actually matters to them before a crisis takes away the opportunity to ask. I'm going to walk you through how to have it, what to say, when to say it, and how to handle the pushback, because in some families there is pushback, and what to do when the conversation is done. Let's get into it. Welcome to Sandwich Generation Life. This channel is for adults raising children while also caring for aging parents. Before we talk about how to have this conversation, let's be honest about why most families don't. The obvious answer is nobody likes talking about death. That's the boogeyman. Our culture treats death as something to be avoided in conversation, in planning, in everything. We use every euphemism available to avoid saying the word directly. But for most families, the avoidance goes deeper than that. There is fear that bringing it up will upset your parents, that mentioning death will feel like rushing it, or you have given up on them. Maybe death is going to come sooner if you talk about it, right? But planning is something we all do. And there is that fear that you will say something wrong, that you'll open a door that cannot be closed. There is the complicated family dynamics, the siblings who have different opinions, the parent who shuts down certain topics, the history that makes some conversations feel impossible. And sometimes, honestly, there is your own fear, your own grief about what this conversation represents, your own reluctance to accept that your parent is aging and that things are changing and this season of life is real. Not just for your parents, sometimes it makes it even real for you. And I want to name all of it in this video because pretending this is easy does not help anyone. It is not easy, but it is necessary, and it is one of the most loving things you can do for your parent and for your family. So my parent made it easy. They had a will in place and had already paid for cemetery costs, a plot, actually 2 plots, and the opening closing of everything around the cemetery. So quite a few things were pre-planned and already paid for. And also my parent made it easy because they knew when things were getting rough for them, that they were unable to take care of paying their bills and things like that. So already they had the conversation with the family about someone helping out with paying the bills, not paying the bills out of their pocket, but just making sure that the bills that the parent had was being sent off each month on time and taken care of. So this conversation was not a hard one for my family. I've talked to others along the way about the fact that some of their conversations were hard for their families. And so I do know that it's hard. It's not as easy as it was for us as it is for some families. So that's where I think we had it a bit more easy. But we still had hiccups along the way. So don't take it as, oh, it was easy for you and things like that. We did have some challenges along the way, even with the pre-planning of our parents. Whatever has been making this hard for you, however, I hope this video helps you find a way through it. The most common things that families say after a medical crisis is, we keep meaning to have that conversation. We keep meaning to have it. But it has to happen. This is a moment to at least start the conversation. And I understand that. Life is full. Your parent seems okay, right? There is always something more pressing, right? But there is the reality about the window for this conversation. Your parent needs to be healthy enough, cognitively and emotionally, to have a meaningful discussion about their wishes. The window exists right now for most families watching this video. It does not exist after a stroke in most cases. It does not exist after dementia diagnosis has progressed. It does not exist from a hospital bed in the middle of a crisis, right? The right time to have this conversation is always before you need it. Not when things are scary. Not when time is running out. Now, when your parent is themselves, when they can express what they actually feel and think, when the conversation can be calm and unhurried and real, right? I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying this because if you finish watching this video and you still don't have that conversation, I want you to understand what you are risking. Not just the practical and legal consequences we talked about in the last few videos, but the chance to truly know your parents' wishes and the peace that comes from knowing you honored them. That chance is available right now. It may not always be. Before you have these conversations, a few things that will help. Know what you want to cover. You do not need to cover everything in one sitting. In fact, trying to cover everything at once is one of the reasons these conversations go badly. Pick 2 or 3 areas you most want to understand and leave the rest to follow up in another conversation. Choose the right setting. That's a key point right there. Private, calm, unhurried, not in the middle of the holiday gathering, not right before your parent has to be somewhere, right? Not when either of you is already stressed or tired. Some families find it easier to have this conversation during a low-key activity, a drive, a meal at home, a walk. The side-by-side nature of those moments can make the conversation feel less confrontational than sitting face to face. Then decide who should be there. For the first conversation, often just you and your parent is right. Fewer people, less pressure. Siblings can be looped in later. If there are family dynamics that could derail the conversation, an older sibling who tends to take over, a family member whose presence alone makes your parent shut down, consider whether a one-on-one conversation first is a better starting point. So let's go to the agenda. Go into this conversation ready to listen more than talk. The goal is not to get answers checked off a list. The goal is for your parent to feel heard and for you to genuinely understand who they are and what matters to them. If the conversation goes somewhere unexpected, let it. Some of the most important things families learn come from following where the conversation leads you, not from sticking to the plan. I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I'm sticking to the plan. I have all my little checklists and I go, okay, line one, check. Line two, check. Let me give you something concrete. Because for many people, the hardest part is knowing how to open the conversation at all. Here are some ways to start. Use the one that sounds the most like you. Okay. If your parent is generally healthy, try, Mom, I've been thinking about something and I want to talk to you about it. Not because anything is wrong, but because it matters to me to understand what you would want if something ever happened. Or you can say, I have been doing some reading about planning ahead for families like ours, and I realize I don't actually know what you want in a medical situation. I really would like to know. Now, that's a scenario for a healthy parent. Now, if there have been a recent health event, you might want to try this. After what happened last month, I think we need to talk about some things. Not to be scary, but because I love you. And I want to make sure I know what you would want if things get more serious. Or you can use someone else's experience as a door opener. Try, I heard about a family recently who went through a really hard situation because no one knew what their parent wanted. It made me realize I don't want us to ever be like that. Can we talk? Or, okay, if your parent has raised the topic themselves, try this. You've mentioned a few times that you've been thinking about this. I'm here, and I really want to hear what's on your mind. You will notice that none of these openings start with documents. None of them say, do you have a will? Or have you set up a power of attorney, right? They start with your parent, with your relationship, with love and curiosity, not logistics. The documents matter, don't get me wrong. We covered them in the last several videos. But this conversation has to start with the human being. The documents follow from that. Once the conversation is open, here is what you're listening for. Think about these as areas of understanding, not questions on a form, right? Before you get into specific medical scenarios, try to understand what quality of life means to your parent. What makes life worth living for them? Is it being able to recognize the people they love? Being able to have a conversation? Being at home? Being independent? Being free from pain? These values become a lens through which every specific decision gets filtered. A parent who says, I want every possible day, whatever it takes, is giving you specific guidance, right? Then one who says, if I cannot know my family, I do not want to be kept alive by machines, right? There are stark differences there. Neither is right or wrong, but knowing which your parent believes gives you something real to work with, right? So let's talk about their fears, right? What is your parent most afraid of? For many families, it's not death itself. It is what leads up to it, right? Pain, loss of dignity, losing their mind, being a burden on people they love, or being alone. Naming those fears give you the chance to reassure them, and it gives you guidance about what matters most to them in their care. So let's talk about specific medical scenarios. Once you have the values conversation, the specific scenarios feel less abstract. You don't need to work through every possible medical situation. Focus on the ones most relevant, given your parents' age and current health. Some questions to gently explore. If you had a serious illness and treatment would extend your life, but significantly affect your quality of life, how would you think about that? If you were in a situation where you could not recover, what would you want us to do? If you could not communicate and decisions had to be made about your care, is there anything you want us to know? These are not easy questions. Let your parent take their time. Be comfortable with their silence, even. You're not running a meeting where you need to get that answer right away. You're having a conversation that may be one of the most important to both of your lives. So let's talk about practical matters. Once the deeper conversations has happened, you can move toward the practical. Do you have a will, a durable power of attorney, a healthcare directive? Do you know where all of this is located? Is there anyone you want me to be in contact with? A doctor, an attorney, a financial advisor? If those documents are not in place, this is the natural moment to bring it up. You have laid the emotional foundation. Now the practical work feels like an extension of love rather than a cold checklist, right? One of the most powerful questions you can ask your parent, and one of the most overlooked, is simply, is there anything you want me to know? Anything you have been carrying that you have not had a chance to say? You may be surprised by the answer. I know that my parent had another difficult conversation with us. My parent did not want to be on his or her deathbed with tubes out of every part of their body, tubes, wires, and things like that. They wanted to not be resuscitated. That's a hard conversation, right? That's really hard to take, because if that's what they want, it's not up to you to, in that moment, say, I want to do everything I can do to keep you here with us, right? It's not up to you. It's up to them to make that decision and you to kind of rest in that. Our parent had the wherewithal to say, this is what I want. I want a DNR, do not resuscitate. And they told us, they told their doctors, and we relayed that when they could not. These conversations give families things that paperwork never can. They give you your parent more fully, more honestly than you could ever have known before. Let me talk about something that happens in a lot of families. You try to open this conversation and your parent shuts it down. They change the subject. They say they do not want to talk about it. They say they are not ready. They say you're being morbid, right? They get upset. That's the worst thing, because you never want to upset your parent, obviously. First, do not take it personally, and do not give up. Your parents' resistance almost always comes from one of a few places: fear of losing control, superstition, that talking about death invites it. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier, right? Not wanting to face reality of their own mortality, or simply they never had anyone ask, and the question caught them off guard. A few things that can help when the door closes: back off and come back later. If your parent shuts down the conversation, honor that moment. Don't push it, because then you're going to have that resistance, right? Don't push it. Say something like, that's okay. I just want you to know whenever you're ready, I'm here and I want to hear what you think. Then drop it. Come back to it another time. Or you can use a side door. Sometimes a direct conversation does not work, but an indirect one does. A news story about a family that faced a medical crisis, a family who went through a difficult end of life situation, a documentary, a book, a conversation about someone else's experience. You are not being manipulative. I know it kind of sounds that way. You are creating an opening, a way for your parent to engage with the ideas without it feeling like a personal confrontation. Bring in a third party. That's another option, right? Sometimes it's easier to have a conversation facilitated by someone outside the family. A physician who raised advanced care planning in a routine part of a checkup, an estate planning attorney who talks through why the documents matter, a social worker, a chaplain, a counselor who specializes in end of life conversations. There is no shame in asking for help. The goal is the conversation, however it happens. And then accept partial progress also. You may not get the full conversation in one sitting or ever. Your parent may be willing to talk about some things and not other things. They may be willing to do the paperwork without talking about the values. That is still progress, right? Take any little bit that you can get. Something is better than nothing. A partial conversation is better than no conversation. A will without a full discussion of values is better than nothing in place at all. Keep showing up. Keep leaving the door open. That is all in your control. And that's all you can do, right? When the conversation is over, okay, we've gotten past all the other obstacles, all the other checklist items, wink, wink. When the conversation is over, a few things worth doing. Write down what you learned, not in a clinical way, but in a way that captures the essence of what your parent expressed, their values, their fears, their wishes. This becomes a record that will matter. Share the key points with the people who need to know. The named healthcare agent, siblings, if they are involved in caregiving, your parents' physicians, if appropriate. And if this conversation surfaces the fact that documents are missing or incomplete, follow up. Not 6 months from now, as soon as possible. Offer to research attorneys. Offer to sit with your parent while they work through a state form. This conversation is not a finish line. It is the beginning of an ongoing dialogue, one that should be revisited as your parents' health changes, as your family situation evolves, as new decisions come into view. The family who navigates this season best are not the ones that had perfect one-on-one conversations. They're the ones who kept talking imperfectly, sometimes uncomfortably, but consistently, who keep showing up, who never let the door fully close. And that's always an ongoing thing. So don't be concerned about getting all the information. We didn't have all the information before my parent got to a situation where they couldn't communicate anymore. We didn't have all the information. We learned it as we went along. So again, ongoing. When I took over my parents' finances and paid the bills, I didn't know right away that I needed a POA. I learned that as we went along and as I talked to different bills, different utility companies and things like that. So you'll get it. Don't be so concerned about that. So I want to leave you with something simple. The conversation I'm asking you to have is hard. I know it is. but it is also one of the most profound things you can do for the person you love. Because what you're doing underneath all the logistics and the documents, the specific questions, and saying to your parent, I see you. I want to know what matters to you. And when the time comes, I will fight to make sure that it is what happens. That is a gift very few people give the person they're caring for. And it is available to you right now. If this video is helpful, please share it. Someone in your life is avoiding this conversation. This might be what finally helps them start it. Leave a comment below. Have you had this conversation with your parent? What made it possible? Or what has been making it hard? I read every comment, and this community is a safe place to be honest. In the next video in the series, we are moving to VA benefits, something I haven't talked about to this point, but something that's close to my heart. One of the most searchable items and confusing topics as well. Not many people know that they can apply for VA benefits, even if you've been in the military. So we're going to break that down. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss that video. And until the next one, goodbye.